Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Question. Who's got a question? I bet you do.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the Worry-Free Retirement, with your host, retirement specialist and six-time author and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
Several years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting with an older gentleman interested in our services who asked me to describe in detail my experience in the field of finance and the number of people I've worked with over the years. After taking a minute to think about it, I responded, "Well, I hate to brag, but..." And then he quickly interrupted me and said this, "Son, if what you're about to tell me is true, it ain't bragging." So today, and for the next several weeks, I will use my 41 plus years of experience in hosting a TV show for more than 30 years and meeting with all these people and overseeing game plans and owning a firm which handles more than $1.1 billion of client assets. This little man in the sweater vest is going to try to answer some of the questions that are tossed to us daily, as well as many of the questions that our 20 full-time employees at Tony Walker Financial who must answer these questions as well. Oh, speaking of the more than 30 plus years I've hosted a TV show, it's funny to look back on how this journey began. It all began at a local cable company back in the mid-90s, where back then anyway, these newly formed cable companies were required by law to offer free TV shows and, get this, free production of them as well. Which, as someone who had years past had graduated from Western Kentucky University with a broadcasting degree, how in the world could I pass up a free TV show? And thus, Your Money Matters was born. Now, keep in mind, back in the 90s, these local cable stations had to air on TV whatever came through the front door. And man, were some of these programs hilarious.
How do you put pants away for the winter?
Oh, that's one of my favorite subjects. It depends on the type of material that the pants are made out of. Mm-hmm. If they're all-on, nylon, or the Dacron, or the polyester type of pants, it requires nothing more than washing, pressing, and placing them in a plastic bag, putting them in the drawer. However, if they're wool pants, they have to be dry cleaned, then they have to be carefully laid away, and one must stuff them with balls, mothballs in particular, to protect them against those cute little things that fly around and eat them during the winter.
Speaking of questions, as I reflect on my 41 years in this business, it is estimated that in meeting with more than 20,000 savers, and we're assuming that each one of them asked me 5 questions during those meetings, that means I would have fielded more than 100,000 questions over that period of time. And since we don't have time for me to answer 100,000 questions today, we do have time to answer the most frequently asked questions we receive at Tony Walker Financial from people just like you. And to help get our ducks in a row on how we begin this journey of answering all these questions, our own Trey Juergens took the time to organize them into categories. So when we come back, we're going to start with retirement readiness as our first category. So stay tuned. If you have questions about your retirement, good stuff coming up. I'm Tony Walker. This is the Worry-Free Retirement.
This Tony Walker Financial 5-star review comes to us from Michael Hall. We had been watching Tony Walker every Sunday for a while before I turned 60, and we knew we had to visit Mr. Walker. So glad we did. Tony and his team laid out a terrifically easy-to-follow game plan explaining everything. Tony Walker Financial really does alleviate lots of stress and worry from your life. Believe us, it is certainly one of the best decisions we have made to date. Because of it, we have led several of our friends to Tony Walker Financial, and they too are now worry-free. Thank you, Tony and team, for all you continue to do. If you'd like to read more of our 5-star reviews, simply log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
Who can you trust? It's one of the most important decisions you'll have to make. Question is, are you ready? Well, we're here to help at Tony Walker Financial. You know, we care more about you than we do your money, and we have over 3,500 happy clients and an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau to prove it. Rolling over a 401k, confused about Social Security, maybe you're afraid of running out of money. Learn how to use and enjoy and protect your hard-earned money. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and let's get started. Our Tony in the Trenches comes to us from Dave in Louisville. Let's take a look. He says, Tony, I'm 64 years old and thinking of retiring this year. I currently have $800,000 in my 401k and wondering if I can retire. He goes on to say, I recently discussed this with a representative of our 401k plan who said that if I left the money with her, she could grow it to over $3 million by the time I pass away, which makes no sense, as I would rather start enjoying it than keep saving it. What do you say? Well, folks, this is something I'm running into more and more. The financial world has no clue what they're talking about in terms of the saver personalities that we tend to deal with. Most savers would like to use and enjoy this money well before they die, and most of the savers, anyway, that I mention and work with, would rather use this money and enjoy it with their kids. They're not interested in having $2 and $3 million left. This is why I wrote the book, Live Well, Die Broke. It's to help people understand that life is short. You need to use this money while you can. And the idea of trying to just stockpile money just for the fun of it and leave to the kids one day literally makes no sense whatsoever. All right, I wanted to cover, we're talking about this retirement readiness. Now, this is going to be a different format today. What we've done is we've got all of the most frequent questions that are asked, but many of these questions that were shared with me are from the wonderful staff at Tony Walker Financial, those 20 full-time employees who are on the front lines day in and day out getting these questions. So what I did, I polled our staff and I said, send me some of your most frequent questions. So over the next it could even take 4 weeks, folks. This is some good stuff, but we're going to do our best to cover from all of the different staff members the most frequently asked questions. But before we get into this is going to set the stage very well with this article. This came out recently in Investment News. It basically says retirement investors say wealth isn't the key to happiness, according to this survey. And it goes on to say that the happiest participants in our study emphasize the need to balance money, health, family, and personal interest as a path to a more fulfilling retirement. So basically, folks, this is something we've been saying all along. Even when I wrote my first book years ago called The Worry-Free Retirement, it was this idea that there is no magic number out there. There's no magic age. What we're trying to do is strike a balance between work, family, and money, and then as best we can, put you, the client, in control of making those decisions. And then our job is to make sure you have plenty of money to do what it is we think you can accomplish with the money you've saved. So what we're going to do, we'll go off. Let's start now with, as we think about this premise of trying to help you enjoy your money before it's too late, here's the first question I want to cover. This comes in from several of our staff members, but we get this all the time. The question is, how much do I need to comfortably retire? And I would say this, in working in this field for so many years, what I always say is you define to me what is comfortable. And this is why when I meet with people, I meet with almost all of the people on the first meeting because I've just done this so long. I've literally met with thousands of people. And my first question is, tell me what you want to accomplish. This is called the vision exercise. This is the first step of our process. And it is the most important because if you get that wrong, if an advisor doesn't know how to ask the right questions and figure out what this person who is retired or getting ready to retire wants to accomplish, the plan is going to fall apart. So that's the first thing. You have to meet with somebody, a trained retirement specialist, that can help you clarify your vision and define for you what's comfortable. Now, before we move to the next question, I will say this. The goal of the retirement planning specialist is, I call this front door, back door planning. We're trying to keep you in a very similar lifestyle, and the job is to take all of this money you've saved for retirement, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Most of it is in these tax-infested 401k plans, and we've got to convert that to an income that you cannot outlive, but also meets the expenses that are going out the back door. So this is what we're good at Tony Walker Financial. We can help you zero in on what amount of money you're going to need to be comfortable in retirement. This next question comes to us all the time. This is a good one. Can I retire now, or do I have to wait to my full retirement age? So now what we're going to do, we're going to go to our own Heather Hughes, and Heather's going to briefly share with us what does full retirement age mean, and why do so many of our clients, how are they able to retire, in many cases, well before this age?
Full retirement age refers to the age that you are eligible to receive your full Social Security retirement benefit. Often that's between ages 66 and 67, depending on your birth year. Oftentimes, you can retire prior to your full retirement age by utilizing retirement accounts, other non-qualified accounts, and or deciding to take a reduced early Social Security benefit. We can look at your situation to determine if retiring prior to your age 67 or full retirement age is right for you.
All right, our next most common question, and I understand this, one of the greatest fears of all savers is running out of money in retirement. So in many cases, people will come to us. Maybe they've been to an advisor who says, well, it looks like you're going to be fine until age 82 and then you're going to be out of money. Or we've run something called a Monte Carlo. You'll be fine until 85. Well, that's not very reassuring, especially if you live past those ages. So the question is, will I one day run out of money? My response is, not if you have plenty of
mailbox money.
You see, folks, mailbox money, which is a trademark term of Tony Walker Financial, is the ability to invest in things, mainly fixed annuities that provide what we call income riders. They can be SPIAs, but mainly income annuities, which once those incomes are turned on, the guarantee is that you cannot outlive your money, even if you live 30 or 40 years. So to explain what happens when somebody, a client of Tony Walker Financial, calls in to turn on their mailbox money and how easy it is for us to do so, we'll turn it over to our own Mandy Houchins.
Starting your mailbox money is very easy to do. Simply call our office and we can mail the form to you or possibly even get it set up over the phone. Within a couple of weeks, you will start receiving the funds, guaranteed for life.
All right, another frequent question we receive from savers at Tony Walker Financial is this one. How much can I safely withdraw each year? So to help us is my fellow fiduciary here in the Louisville office, Trey Juergens is going to tackle that question.
That's one of the most important questions we hear, and honestly almost impossible to answer without a written plan. Too many savers plug numbers into online retirement calculators, assuming those answers will be accurate. That's where our written game plan comes in. Using our proprietary income planning software and very conservative assumptions, we'll show you a sustainable withdrawal strategy, all designed to supplement income sources like Social Security or a pension without the fear of running out of money. The goal isn't guessing. The goal is a clear, written game plan.
Oh yeah, very good stuff there. All right, our final question in the retirement readiness, this is a biggie. And you may have seen this before. The financial world, they don't use it much anymore, but for years, Wall Street referred to something called the 4% rule. So to talk a little bit about the 4% rule and why we at Tony Walker Financial do not adhere to this rule, I'm going to turn it over to our own Wes Walker, who deals a lot with the investments at Tony Walker Financial and counseling people on how much money they can take out and avoid what we call the 4% rule.
Thanks, Tony. The 4% rule is a traditional finance theory in which you would take your retirement savings and withdraw 4% per year. It hinges on the ability for you to make 4% or greater in your portfolio so that you're basically replacing what you take out. Modern day estimates say this range now needs to be between 3.3 and 3.8% because of lowered interest rates, but it's not a strategy that we follow at Tony Walker Financial.
All right, we're going to our next category. When we return, Social Security planning questions coming your way. Good stuff. This is the Worry-Free Retirement. We'll be right back. Having worked in the retirement planning field for 40 years, I know it's not just about how much money you've saved for retirement, but making sure you one day don't run out of money. That's where mailbox money comes in.
Mailbox money!
A reliable, lifelong income, much like the pension plans from the past. If you're interested in turning your 401k into mailbox money, let's talk. Just set up your free 10-minute phone call with myself at TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Our Live Well Die Broke moment comes to us from Mr. Dave Sinclair, who after sharing his time and his artful ability to build what he refers to as miniatures and this was also featured on our recent Worry-Free Spotlight, so you may have caught that. Mr. Sinclair was gracious enough to build Tony Walker Financial a replica of our Louisville offices located at 8303 Shelbyville Road. So thank you, Mr. Sinclair, for your business and also your generous spirit in thinking of others. All right, now let's get back to our most frequently asked questions. Now we're talking about Social Security. And let's start off with the first question that I get all the time. Tony, what is going to happen with Social Security? In other words, I think what they're asking is this thing going to go broke or what? Now, folks, nobody has a crystal ball on this issue, but the trust fund is set to run out of money depending on when they've covered the different years. It always fluctuates. Now, here's my take on it. And again, I've been doing this for 41 years. I don't think the Social Security fund is literally going to go belly up. That would be political suicide for anybody that would allow that to happen. What's going to happen, they'll have to do this. I think Social Security, they're going to probably tax more of it heavily, but more importantly, it's probably going to go to a means-based test. A lot of government programs are based on that right now. You just look at Medicare. There's more Medicare premiums paid under IRMA if you make more money. Social Security is taxed differently if you make more money. So my thoughts would be, for those of you who make more and more money, these benefits you think you're going to get are probably going to be scaled back. That's my take. So what I tell people, if you're a young buck like Aaron or Derek, maybe quite frankly, maybe some concerns for Social Security. But if you're retired or nearing retirement, my personal belief is while they may adjust the benefits to you one day, I don't think anything's going to, quote, happen to the system. All right, next question. Here's a good one. Can I work and still collect Social Security? I mean, this comes up a lot. A lot of people are starting to retire early. Maybe they're under their full retirement age at 67, but they want to go out and make a part-time living, but they want to draw money, and they just are totally confused as to whether they can do that. So to help us out is one of our main people in the Bowling Green office who specializes in Social Security planning, Lisa Allerkamp.
If you begin drawing your Social Security benefit prior to full retirement age and continue to work, there's an annual earnings limit. Currently, the limit is $23,400. For any earned income that exceeds this limit, Social Security will withhold $1 for every $2 of your benefit. However, you don't completely lose the funds. They will be added back to your benefit over time once you reach full retirement age.
Okay, next up, this is a biggie. This gets asked all the time. Two spouses, both, collecting their Social Security. And here's the question. What happens to my Social Security if my spouse passes away? To help us answer this question, let's turn it over to fellow fiduciary in our Bowling Green office, Miss Heather Hughes.
It really is very dependent on how long the spouses were married to each other, the age of the surviving spouse, and some other things. If both spouses are currently collecting Social Security, the surviving spouse will essentially receive the higher of the two Social Securities that are being received. It's very important to talk with Social Security Administration to see what you are eligible for when a spouse does pass away. Typically, there will also be a $255 death benefit that is a one-time payment as well.
Next on tap, Social Security and whether it is taxed or not. TJ, take it away.
Yes, Social Security is subject to tax, but only up to 85%. And that's determined by your filing status and your income from outside sources plus half of your Social Security.
Thanks, TJ. Now, our final question on Social Security is, should I take my Social Security now or delay it and use other assets? So to help us on that, let me go over to the whiteboard right now. So let's suppose someone is 62 years of age. If they draw Social Security now, it'll be $2,200 a month. If they wait till 67, it'll grow to $2,800 a month. Or if they wait till 70, that's the longest you can defer your Social Security benefits, it would be a whopping $3,500 a month. So when do we take it? Do we wait or do we start it now? Now, this is a very involved question. I'm not going to be like these YouTubers out there and do some blanket statement. This requires a careful analysis, but this is an example of what we are thinking about when somebody comes in with this question. In this example I'm going to share, they had after-tax money of about $80,000. This was money in the bank. That would be after tax. And then also they had some Roth IRAs. The pre-tax amount was $1 million. So $1 million is in this pre-tax 401k plan, totally tax infested. They're going to have to pay the taxes. They can put off the pain all they want to. And my concern is, as we look at the current tax brackets as we record this show at the end of 2025, down the road, if they wait, what could these tax brackets be? My guess would be they could be much higher. So the question is, do you take Social Security now and wait on this? And in this example, no, I would not. In fact, what I would do is definitely wait at least until 67, and I would immediately begin to deal with what I call that tax tumor. In other words, I would begin to start immediately taking money out of that tax-infested IRA because it's going to be taxed anyway. Kind of like that old Fram oil filter. You can pay them now or you can pay them later. So what we would do in our process, our tax-certified folks would jump in. We would look at their tax bracket. We got to know the tax brackets now. That's a given. At least we can plan around those because we know what they are. And we would get that money out of there as quickly as we could, delay the Social Security because there are some advantages tax-wise to doing so. So folks, if this sounds like you, if you are in a maze, if you feel like things are complicated or scattered, you don't have a retirement planning firm locally that you can meet with that has consistency in what they're doing, has done this a long time, give us an opportunity to talk. We call it the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call. We work with retirees and those nearing retirement. And to set up a time to talk to me, just log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com, TonyWalkerFinancial.com, or call us anytime at 877-499-9255. We'll be back with what the Bible has to say about money and the 4 main questions that I think all Christians should be thinking about. We'll be right back.
Are you retired or retiring soon? Do you have a 401k, IRA, 403b, thrift savings account, or lump sum pension that you'd like to move to safer territory? Did you know that all the money you see on your 401k statement isn't really yours? Depending on your overall taxable income, the government has essentially a lien on your 401k that can tax as much as 40% of your money when you go to take it out. Tony Walker calls this the 401k tax tumor. For over 40 years, retirement specialist Tony Walker has helped thousands of savers worry less about money by creating game plans to deal with your tax tumor. Get control of your retirement by controlling the taxes owed on it. Schedule a free meeting to see if you can reduce your tax tumor and provide a guaranteed income you can never outlive. To get started, simply log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
You've spent 30 years building a nest egg, but as retirement gets closer, the questions start piling up. Will my money last as long as I do? How can I maintain my current lifestyle in retirement without depleting my 401k plan? Well, that's where mailbox money comes in, a guaranteed lifetime income you can never outlive. Learn how to turn your 401k into mailbox money by logging on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 877-499-9255. It is estimated that each day over 10,000 people will turn 65, which means a lot of advisors selling a lot of annuities. Don't get stuck in the wrong annuity. Get a second opinion from TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
This Tony Walker Financial 5-star review comes to us from Ann Smithson. We came to Tony because our bad experience with a former fiduciary. Tony is so wonderful to talk to, and he takes the time to ensure we are comfortable with the action plan we developed. They have impressed us with their quick response. Trey and the whole team has been great to work with. They take the time to answer our questions and to ensure we understand everything. If you'd like to read more of our 5-star reviews, simply log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
Have you recently retired, been laid off, or offered a buyout? Has the company you work for moved, been acquired, or closed its doors forever? And finally, do you have a 401k with a previous employer you'd like to move to safer territory? Then take advantage of this opportunity to move your 401k or lump sum pension to Tony Walker Financial. Let's meet in person to discuss your retirement options. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com to schedule your free, no obligation appointment. Let us help you today.
Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement with the money missionary himself, Tony Walker.
Dating all the way back to the mid-1990s when I worked with a local cable company to produce my weekly show back then called Your Money Matters, I've always made it a practice to conclude my TV shows with what the Bible has to say about money. Today, and for the next several weeks, I will consider the most frequent questions I receive from savers who struggle with their take on money, as opposed to what they think God's take on it is as well. To me, all roads lead to these four categories of what you can choose to do with your money. Number one, giving. Secondly, the category of spending. Third, leaving. And finally, fourth, investing. That's pretty much it. Whether you are a believer or non-believer, this whole complicated process of what we have to do with the money that God has blessed us with boils down to these four basic decisions. So let's start with category number one, giving, and more specifically, who you should give your money to and what amount. Let's start with the charity of one's own household, your family. And this reminds me of the old saying, charity begins at home. And 1 Timothy 3:5 talks about this, which I agree with. In fact, I so much agree with this verse that in my office I have 10 resolutions posted, and this one's at the front and center. Because, in my opinion, all throughout the Bible, God's Word reminds us believers, that for someone not to take care of their household, well, we're worse than an infidel. Why? Because providing for one's family allows other families to see the grace and love and provisions of God. It's a picture of not only our responsibility to focus on our family, but it allows family members to see and learn from those in a position of authority to provide and even, yes, to protect. In Genesis 7:13, we see that Noah took only his family members on the ark. So, Tony, you might say, should we then neglect giving to others? To which I'd respond, absolutely not. But my concern is that Christians are relying too much on percentages rather than simply trusting on God's generosity and liberty that He affords those whom He has called. Which is why, for me personally, I do not focus on giving certain percentages to church or charity, but rather I give as God is urging me to give. This concept of the liberty afforded to us by God's Holy Spirit is discussed in great detail in 2 Corinthians 9, verse 5, where Paul talks about the unction of God's Spirit and this notion that if we are giving in such a manner, that it is not really knowing what the left hand or the right hand is doing. In other words, we shall only give with more liberality to others who are in need. We quickly turn to 2 Corinthians 9:6, which in turn reminds us of the generosity of God and His love for us, which in turn, in verse 7, turns us into cheerful givers. So, Christian, my advice, be sure you are giving and taking care of your immediate family. Do not neglect to help them as best you can, and remember that in many cases, your kids, yes, even your adult children, can use that money you have stockpiled away more now than they can if they were to wait for you to one day croak. As for how much you should give to the church or to your favorite charity, first I would suggest pray about the needs of others and give as you feel led to give, but do so not out of compulsion to give, but rather give from a cheerful heart. You give like that, and I assure you God will be well pleased as a result. Amen? Well, speaking of giving your money to others, assuming you're retired or maybe you're retiring in the near future, I'm not going to ask you to give me a penny today. What I'm going to ask for you is to give me 10 minutes of your time. That's right, to speak to the owner of the company about your situation. In fact, we call this the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call, where you and I can speak for just a few minutes to see if we can help. And if I think we can be of help, we're going to meet in person. That's right, you and I are going to meet. We're going to develop that free written proprietary game plan that only Tony Walker Financial offers. So to take advantage of this free phone call right now, why don't you do this? Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com and click on that Let's Get Started button. Or you can call us anytime to arrange this phone call at 877-499-9255. Well, that's all the time we have today. We're going to be back next week with more of your questions. But between now and then, you remember, if all else fails, you be worry-free and you make it a good one.